Welcome to Timeless Dreams. Subscribe, relax, and drift into sleep with the gentle stories of history. Take a deep breath. Let the air fill your lungs slowly, and then release it gently, as if you are setting aside the weight of the day. Tonight, you've come here not for chores or obligations, but for rest. The world outside your door can wait. Right now, your only task is to settle in. Allow the sounds of the crackling fireplace to soften your thoughts, and let this story carry you away. As you listen, let your shoulders loosen, let your jaw relax, and imagine yourself wrapped in a warm, heavy blanket. With each breath, you sink a little deeper into comfort, as if the bed beneath you is slowly turning into soft earth, steady and grounding. This is your moment of stillness. The edges of the day are blurring, and the night is inviting you into its quiet embrace. But tonight's journey will not be ordinary. It will not take you down familiar streets or into predictable rooms. No, tonight we're slipping back in time, hundreds of years, into the raw and unpredictable heartbeat of the medieval world. You'll find yourself walking through crooked streets, ducking beneath wooden beams, and pushing open doors that creak as though they haven't been oiled in centuries. Tonight, we step inside a medieval tavern. Before we begin, let me ask you a question. Have you ever wondered where ordinary people went after a long day in the fields, or where wandering strangers found warmth in a cold, unfamiliar town? Have you ever imagined the smells, the sounds, and the strange mixture of comfort and danger waiting behind a tavern's heavy wooden door? Tonight, you'll not only imagine it, you'll live it. You'll step inside and feel what it was truly like. So as you lie there, breathing gently and drifting toward sleep, picture yourself walking down a rain-soaked street. The cobblestones are slick, the night air is damp, and the scent of smoke curls through the mist. Your boots are heavy, caked with mud, and your body aches with the weariness of travel. Somewhere in the distance you hear laughter, rowdy and uneven, spilling into the night like a beacon. That is where we are headed. The medieval tavern, the place where peasants and nobles might brush shoulders, where gossip traveled faster than any horse, and where the air itself was thick with smoke, sweat, and secrets. But don't worry, tonight you are safe. This story is meant to soothe you, not alarm you. So even as we walk through these shadowy places together, remember that nothing can harm you here. This is just a story, a dream, a window into another world, offered to you as you drift deeper into sleep. Take another slow breath, in and out. Let your eyelids grow heavier as the journey begins. Now imagine the sound of your boots on the stones. Step by step, you draw closer to that cluster of voices and clattering mugs. A faint glow leaks through cracks in the shutters. The sign above the door is crooked, its paint long faded, perhaps showing the shape of a barrel or maybe a bear. No one's quite sure anymore. The wood is weathered, splintered by time and countless nights of drunken fists slamming against it. You climb the worn step, slick with ale, and place your hand on the iron latch. When you push, the door groans open, the sound long and theatrical, as though the tavern itself is welcoming you, or warning you. And there it is. The heat of the hearth hits your cheeks first, followed by the thick scent of beer and stew, wet wool and smoke. The floor beneath your feet isn't polished stone or wooden planks. It's dirt, scattered with straw, sticky in places you'd rather not know why. You are inside. The noise wraps around you instantly. Laughter erupts from one corner, a sharp argument from another. A woman slams a mug down so hard the drink splashes across the table, but no one flinches. It's just another night. Near the fire, a cluster of figures huddle close, trading gossip and warming their hands. A bard strums a tune that is either heroic or hopelessly out of tune. No one can quite tell. The air is alive here. It's chaotic, dirty, loud, but also strangely comforting. Because the medieval tavern wasn't just about drinking. It was the beating heart of every town. A place where secrets were whispered, alliances forged, and the lonely found company for the night. Settle deeper now, and let yourself feel the rhythm of the place. The tavern's floor creaks with boots. Mugs clink and clash. Somewhere, a dog growls under a table, gnawing on a bone as though it owns the place. A drunk is snoring already, his head resting in a bowl of stew. And behind the bar, or rather, behind the sagging plank of wood that pretends to be a bar, stands the tavern keeper, ruler of this unruly kingdom. They watch everything. They know everything. Who's cheated at cards, who hasn't paid for their drinks, and who's on the verge of throwing the first punch. You don't cross the tavern keeper. Not unless you want to be thrown into the mud outside before you can blink. For now, though, you're just a guest. You find a seat at a lopsided bench, carefully ignoring the damp stain across the wood. A mug is shoved into your hand. It smells sharp, bitter, and strong. You take a sip. It burns, but strangely, it feels good. Warmth spreads through your chest, chasing away the chill of the night. This is where our story begins. And over the course of this night, you'll see more than just a tavern. You'll learn what was served to hungry patrons, how strangers were treated, and what dangers waited for the foolish and unlucky. You'll hear tales whispered in the smoke-filled corners, and you'll discover the strange rituals of medieval life that most history books forget to mention. So as your body softens into rest and your mind begins to drift, know that the story will carry you. It will grow more vivid, more intense, and more detailed as we go. But you need not worry. You are safe, tucked into your bed, listening as time unravels and the medieval tavern comes alive in your imagination. Close your eyes now, if you haven't already. Let the images unfold in the darkness behind your eyelids. Let the crackle of the fire and the rise and fall of my voice guide you. Soon, the boundaries between story and dream will blur, and you will be carried gently and surely into sleep. Welcome, traveler. Tonight, you're not just a listener. You are part of the story. And the medieval tavern is waiting for you. The tavern was not merely a place to drink. It was the breathing, brawling, laughing soul of medieval life. To understand its importance, you must forget the quiet cafes of today, with their menus, music, and mood lighting. A tavern was rarely built for beauty, rarely intended for comfort, and rarely safe in any modern sense of the word. Yet it was alive, pulsing with voices, stories, and the raw necessities of survival. Step deeper with me, traveler, and you will begin to see why these places mattered so much to people who had so little. Imagine the town itself. Narrow, crooked streets with roofs so close they nearly kissed one another, dripping rainwater into the gutters. At the center might stand the market square, bustling in daylight but emptying fast as the sun dipped. Shops closed, candles guttered out, and soon the only glow was from the tavern. No one needed a sign. People followed their ears, their noses, or their instincts. Because if you wanted warmth, gossip, or to forget your worries with a mug in hand, the tavern was where you went. Step inside and let your eyes adjust again to the shifting shadows. In the dim light, you'll notice that the room is not organized the way you might expect. The furnishings are crude, often nothing more than rough benches and tables that wobble under the weight of elbows and mugs. The walls are soot-stained, the air thick with smoke. But the noise, that was the true marker of life. A tavern sounded like a living storm. Men laughed loudly, the sound rolling through the rafters. Women bargained, shouted, sometimes even sang above the din. In the corner, a bard strummed a lute with strings slightly out of tune, adding to the chaos rather than controlling it. A merchant slammed down a pouch of coins, proud of his day's trade, while two peasants argued bitterly over whether one had stolen the other's chicken. In this place, rank and class still existed, but the tavern blurred the lines. A poor farmer could sit beside a traveling knight. A widow could outdrink a priest. Everyone's voice carried equally, drowned or lifted by the noise of the crowd. But remember, this was no gentle place. Danger simmered beneath the surface, like sparks waiting to catch dry straw. At any moment, an argument could swell into a fistfight. A spilled drink could turn into an insult into a brawl, and a brawl into the kind of chaos that might leave the tables overturned and someone tossed into the street. And yet, most nights carried on with a kind of unspoken rhythm. Everyone knew how far to push and when to back down. The tavern was rough, but it was also familiar. It was the hearth of the common folk, the place that anchored them to community. Think of the smells. Oh, they were overwhelming. The acrid tang of ale clung to every surface, mingling with the sharpness of smoke from the hearth. Add to this the scent of wet wool, muddy boots, stale bread, and roasted meat, and you have the kind of fragrance no perfumer would dare bottle. And yet, despite it all, there was something welcoming in that mixture. To walk into the tavern was to walk into a place where you were no longer alone. The tavern keeper presided over it all. Not a nobleman, not a priest, but someone who held just as much power in their own way. They were the silent judge of every night, watching with keen eyes. They poured drinks with one hand and kept track of debts with the other, somehow remembering who owed what without ever writing a word. Their presence anchored the room. If the tavern keeper was in a good mood, the crowd felt lighter, more at ease. If they were grim, you could almost feel the tension thickening, as though everyone sensed a storm brewing. Now, as you sit at your bench, you feel the heat of the hearth warming your face. The mug in your hand is heavy, carved from wood, its rim chipped and stained from countless nights before. The ale within is cloudy, warm, and a little bitter, but after the first gulp, the edge of the day's exhaustion begins to soften. Your muscles loosen, your thoughts drift. For the weary traveler, this drink is more than liquid. It is relief. The chatter around you weaves itself into a tapestry. Someone is telling a story about a knight who lost his horse in a wager. Another boasts about a harvest that was surely exaggerated. And yet another whispers darkly about taxes, about lords, about the endless grind of survival. Within the tavern, voices mingle like threads, each carrying bits of truth, lies, or something in between. It was here that news traveled, faster than any messenger. It was here that rumors were born, grew wings, and flew across the countryside. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine yourself sinking into this rhythm. The fire pops and crackles. The air is thick, yes, but it is warm. You are safe enough, seated here among strangers who have become companions by mere chance of sharing this roof. The night stretches long, and for now, you are a part of it. You may even notice how time itself seems to shift here. Hours pass unnoticed when the fire burns, the mugs are filled, and the songs are sung. Laughter echoes, and voices rise, until eventually the crowd thins, the air grows cooler, and the tavern quiets into embers. But for now, in this moment, it is alive. A medieval tavern was not about luxury, not about comfort. It was about connection, survival, and the strange, unshakable human desire to gather together, even in the mud, even in the smoke. So, traveler, sip your ale, lean back on the rough bench, and let the tavern's heart keep beating around you. Because tonight, this is where your story begins. The tavern, though rough and grimy, was always filled with people who carried their own stories, and if you listened closely, you could almost hear those stories humming through the air. Each face, each voice, each shadow tucked into a corner brought something to the atmosphere. And though you might not yet know their names, you could sense them, the many lives converging within these four smoke-darkened walls. Look first at the farmers. They are easy to spot, their clothes patched, their boots cracked with mud, their hands red and calloused from labor. They come in from the fields, weary from sun or rain, depending on the season. For them, the tavern is a place of relief, a chance to trade the silence of plowing and planting for the clamor of laughter and ale. They gather together at the benches, swapping tales about crops, livestock, or the weather, which to them is no small talk, but a matter of survival. Their laughter is sometimes loud, sometimes desperate, but always genuine. They drink deeply, for tomorrow will come too soon, and with it, the same endless work. Then there are the merchants. They sit straighter, their cloaks a little cleaner, their hands soft compared to the farmers. Coins jingle faintly in their purses, and they know the weight of each one. They sip more carefully, watch more closely. The merchant does not come to the tavern just to drink. They come to trade information, to pick up whispers of a shipment arriving in the next town, or rumors about a lord tightening taxes. Their eyes flicker constantly, assessing the room, and though they laugh along with the farmers, there is always a distance, a calculation. The tavern is as much their office as their escape, and in the corner you might notice a knight or a soldier, still in a dented breastplate, the smell of iron and horse clinging to them. They rarely sit alone, for their presence draws attention, some admiring, some suspicious. They may boast of battles fought, victories won, scars earned in service of their lord. Yet behind the bravado, perhaps there is a shadow, the silence of memories they do not share. A night in a tavern is both a figure of awe and a potential danger, for swords do not rest as easily as mugs, and tempers run high when pride is on the line. But the tavern welcomes more than the strong and the settled. It also gathers wanderers, the travelers, the outcasts, the storytellers who arrive dusty and hungry from the road. Look at the bard with his lute. His songs may be poor in melody, but they are rich in color. He tells stories of far-off lands, of dragons or saints, of kings who were brave or foolish. The children in the room, if any are allowed to linger, sit wide-eyed, hanging on his words. Even the drunkest farmer leans in, half listening, half dozing, letting the music blur his worries for a time. A wandering bard in a tavern is both entertainment and news, for in their words lie tales that spread from village to village, stitched together into the memory of a people. At another table sits a widow. Her shawl is drawn tight around her shoulders, her gaze sharp and steady. She does not laugh as loudly as the others, nor drink as much, but she listens. Always, she listens. For women like her, the tavern is both a place of risk and of necessity. It offers a chance to barter, to find help, to sell a service or learn of an opportunity. But it is also a place where eyes linger too long, where words can turn dangerous. Still, she comes, because she must. Survival often requires walking into places that were not built for comfort. And finally, there are the shadows. The ones who keep to the edges, who speak little, who nurse their drink and watch. Some are thieves, scanning the room for purses that hang loose or hands that grow careless as the night grows late. Some are fugitives, keeping their faces hidden beneath hoods, listening for the sound of pursuit. Others are simply lonely souls, too tired to join in the laughter, content to exist on the margins of warmth and noise. The tavern gives them a kind of shelter too, a place where they can disappear into the crowd. The beauty of the tavern, if beauty can be found in such a place, is that all these people exist together for a few hours, their lives intersecting like tangled threads. The farmer laughs at a knight's tale. The merchant bargains quietly with the widow. The bard sings over the arguments, weaving a story no one asked for but everyone half remembers. And in the center of it all, the tavern keeper keeps watch, as steady as the hearth fire. You sit quietly, observing them all. You sip from your mug, its taste still sharp on your tongue, and let the voices wash over you. There is comfort in the noise, a strange kind of peace in knowing you are surrounded by so many lives. Each person is weary in their own way, burdened with worries you cannot see, and yet here they are, gathered together, drawn by the same need for warmth, for food, for drink, for company. Outside, the night is cold, the rain slick against the cobblestones, but inside, there is life, the kind of life that refuses to be quieted, no matter how hard the world presses down. And though the tavern is filled with smoke, with spilled ale, with danger waiting in the corners, it is also filled with laughter, with music, with the unshakable rhythm of human survival. Lean back now. Let your mind wander among these figures. Let your eyelids grow heavy as you picture their faces, hear their voices. Imagine the warmth of the fire against your skin, the sound of mugs clinking like a heartbeat. You are safe here, in the company of strangers who are more familiar than you realize. For across centuries, across cultures, the need for a place like this never changes. Humans will always gather, will always tell stories, will always lift a cup against the cold night. And so, in this moment, you are part of their world, a guest in a medieval tavern, surrounded by the guests of the night. The tavern was never simply a place of ale and bread, though those were its simplest gifts. It was, above all, a gathering point, a crucible where the lives of peasants, merchants, wanderers, and soldiers met for a brief time before scattering again into the uncertainties of medieval life. As you sit quietly at your small table, the smells of roasted meat and spilled drink still clinging to the air, your attention drifts across the room. The fire crackles, its orange glow licking against the stone hearth, and the shadows it casts seem to dance across the faces of those who linger here tonight. Each person carries a story, though most will never be told in full, and yet you feel them as surely as you feel the heat against your hands. At one long bench sit the farmers. Their backs are bent not from the benches themselves, but from the endless hours of plowing fields and carrying harvests. Their laughter is coarse, and their speech thick with the cadence of earth and toil. A man with soil still clinging to his fingernails raises his mug high, toasting to a season that yielded at least enough grain to see his family through the coming winter. His companions clap him on the back, their cheer genuine if weary. The ale here may be watered down, and the bread not always fresh, but it is enough. For them, it is not the quality that matters, but the company, and the relief of forgetting, if only for an evening, the relentless demands of the land. Closer to the fire, a group of merchants huddle together, their cloaks of finer wool than the tunics of the farmers, their hands cleaner, their voices sharper. They sip slowly, with a caution born not of humility, but of calculation. Each word spoken is measured, each smile half hidden, for merchants know the value of information as well as of coin. They speak in low tones of roads washed out by rain, of markets in the next town, of a noble rumored to be raising taxes. Their laughter is quieter, more restrained, as though even joy must be accounted for in the ledger. Yet even here, they are not immune to the pull of the tavern's warmth. From time to time, one of them leans back, allowing the tension to loosen, letting the ale carry them into brief moments of ease. In a shadowed corner sits a soldier, his armor worn, the steel dulled and scratched by use. He keeps one gauntleted hand on the mug before him, the other resting idly on the pommel of his sword, not as a threat, but out of habit. He speaks little, his eyes half closed as though listening to sounds only he can hear. When he does laugh, it is deep and startling, a sudden crack of thunder in the steady murmur of voices. Some glance toward him with admiration, others with unease, for a man who lives by the sword carries a weight that others cannot easily share. And yet here he is no knight upon a battlefield, but another tired soul in need of warmth, drink, and perhaps the faint reminder of camaraderie. Then the music begins, soft and unpolished, drifting through the haze of smoke and chatter. A wandering bard has settled himself near the hearth, his lute worn, the wood scratched and faded from countless journeys. His voice is rough but steady as he sings a song of faraway hills, of rivers that cut through valleys where few will ever walk. The children, allowed to linger at the edge of the room while their parents drink, lean in with wide eyes. Even the weary farmers grow still, their laughter subdued, their thoughts momentarily carried to places they will never see but can imagine in the warmth of song. The bard plays not for coin alone, though a few copper pieces will find their way into his pouch, but because the telling of stories is as necessary as bread and ale. By the doorway sits a woman wrapped in a shawl, her eyes sharp, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She does not join in the laughter, nor does she drink deeply. She watches. Always she watches. Perhaps she is a widow, come here to find news or trade small goods, or perhaps she seeks no more than a corner where she is not alone. For her, the tavern is both refuge and risk, yet she endures the noise and the wandering gazes because here, at least, there is light and warmth. Outside, the world is colder still, less forgiving. Inside, she can simply exist among the crowd, another soul among many. And then there are those who keep to the edges, cloaked and silent, slipping into shadows as though they belong to them. Their mugs remain half full, their heads bent low. Perhaps they are fugitives avoiding recognition, or thieves scanning the room for an unattended purse, or simply men too weary to share in the noise. The tavern makes space for them too, for even silence has a place among voices. They remain unseen by most, and yet their presence adds to the weight of the night, a reminder that danger and secrecy walk alongside comfort and laughter. As the night stretches on, voices rise and fall like the tide. The laughter grows louder, the arguments sharper, the songs more blurred. Mugs clink against one another, spilling ale across the tables. A farmer slaps the back of a merchant in sudden camaraderie, while the soldier leans his head back against the wall, drifting into half-sleep. The bard plays softer now, his voice tired, but the children still lean close, their eyes heavy yet unwilling to close. The woman in the shawl adjusts her seat, her eyes flicking now to the door, now back to the fire. And in the shadows, the silent figures still wait, as though time itself belongs to them. You feel yourself slipping into the rhythm of the room, the steady beat of voices, the warmth of the fire, the endless weaving of stories. It is not peace in the purest sense, for the tavern holds too many dangers, too many tensions just beneath the surface. Yet it is a kind of balance, the balance that keeps people alive through long winters and weary days. Each person here carries burdens you cannot see, and yet tonight, for these few hours, they are all bound together beneath the same roof, by the same fire. And as you breathe in the heavy air, you sense that this is what makes the tavern endure, not its ale, nor its bread, nor even its warmth, but the gathering itself. It is the place where solitude ends, where lives touch briefly before moving on again, where survival feels a little less lonely. And in that realization, your mind softens, your body relaxes, and the sounds around you blur into a comforting hum. For here in this medieval tavern, you are no longer outside the storm. You are part of the company of the night. The night has thickened now. The tavern no longer hums with the same early energy that filled it at dusk. The first waves of laughter and cheer have faded, leaving behind something slower, quieter, and heavier. The fire in the hearth burns lower, its once bright flames now settling into a bed of glowing embers. The orange light that spills across the room is gentler, more subdued, flickering lazily as shadows grow longer and darker around the edges of the walls. The air feels different too, thicker with smoke, more tangled with the scent of sweat and spilled ale. Yet it is not unpleasant. It is the atmosphere of a tavern after hours, when the first layer of masks begins to fall away. The farmers have quieted. Where once they shouted over one another with boasts of crops and livestock, now they lean back against the benches, their words slow and slurred. A few of them have dozed off where they sit, their mugs slipping from loose fingers, spilling dregs of drink across the wood. Others speak in whispers, voices dropping into tones more honest than before. Tales of hardship drift through the smoke, of broken plows, of children lost to fever, of debts owed to lords who never eased their grip. These are not the boasts they began the evening with. These are the truths that spill only when the night grows late, when the company feels less like a gathering and more like a circle of weary companions bound together by survival. At the merchant's table, the mood has shifted as well. The careful restraint that marked their earlier conversations has softened under the weight of drink. They lean closer now, their words slipping more freely, though still guarded in tone. One speaks of a dangerous road filled with bandits, another of a lord's steward demanding bribes at the market gates. There is bitterness in their voices now, the bitterness of men who live not only by coin but by negotiation, forever caught between lords who demand taxes and peasants who can afford little. And still, even here, calculations continue. Their eyes dart toward one another, measuring each word, testing its worth, even as the ale lowers their defenses. The tavern, for them, is both refuge and marketplace. The soldier in the corner remains as he was, though his eyes are half-lidded, his head tilting forward slightly, as if the night has finally pressed its weight against him. He has drunk little compared to the others, his mug still half full, his posture still alert beneath its weariness. The habit of vigilance does not fade easily for a man who has walked battlefields. Yet, in rare moments, his face softens. A small smile lingers when the bard strikes a gentle chord, when the children laugh softly at a verse, when the murmured voices in the room settle into a low, steady rhythm. For a moment, the soldier seems simply human again, not a man of war, but a man of silence, cradled by warmth. The bard's song has slowed, his voice nearly breaking on the last verses he sings. His lute seems as tired as his hands, its strings dull beneath the smoke-heavy air. Still, he plays. His song now is softer, no longer of rivers and distant hills, but of loss, of seasons that pass too quickly, of faces remembered only in dreams. The children, at last, have succumbed to sleep, their heads resting on their mother's laps or against the wooden beams of the wall. The parents watch them with weary affection, relieved for a moment's peace, lulled by the bard's fading notes. And then, in the farthest corner, the woman in the shawl shifts. Her eyes, which had wandered between fire and doorway, sharpen suddenly as though catching a glimpse of something unseen by others. She leans forward slightly, her fingers tightening around the fabric drawn close to her shoulders. Perhaps it is the soldier she studies, or the merchants as they lower their voices, or the shadowed figures who still linger silently by the edges. She does not speak. She has not spoken once. But her presence holds weight, as though she knows more of this room than any of the others. For some, silence is absence. For her, silence is power. The cloaked figures remain, half swallowed by darkness, but their stillness is no longer so unremarkable. One has turned slightly, enough for the firelight to brush the edge of his hood, revealing a jaw marked with scars. Another keeps his hand within his cloak, fingers never straying far from what might be a knife. They do not drink. They do not laugh. They are not here for company, nor for warmth. Their purpose is harder to guess, and yet their presence reminds all who glance their way that the tavern is never entirely safe, never entirely free from the world's shadows. Outside, the storm presses against the walls, its wind rattling the shutters, its rain beating a steady rhythm against the roof. Each gust seems to remind those within that the night is far from gentle, that the tavern is not only a gathering place, but a fragile refuge from the cold vastness beyond. The fire sputters as if echoing the storm, its sparks leaping briefly before fading into ash. The room grows dimmer, softer, and the mood with it, more confessional, more weighted, more real. It is in moments like this, when the tavern has settled into its truest self, that you begin to feel its heartbeat. Not the noise of the early evening, not the bluster of laughter or the clash of mugs, but this quieter rhythm that belongs only to the late hours. It is the sound of truths whispered, of wounds hidden beneath laughter, of loneliness softened by the nearness of others. It is the moment when stories are shared not for entertainment, but for survival, spoken aloud so they do not vanish into silence. You notice how every face here, even the ones you may never speak to, carries a trace of this weariness, this need for belonging. The farmer who dozes at the bench, the merchant counting coins with fumbling fingers, the soldier lost in half-sleep, the bard fading with each chord, the woman in the shawl who never speaks, the silent men whose shadows stretch long. Each of them has come here for reasons beyond drink, They have come because the world outside offers no warmth, no company, no reprieve. The tavern does not heal them, but it holds them. It gives them one night to be more than their burdens. And so, as you sit among them, breathing the heavy air, feeling the warmth of the embers on your skin, you too are drawn deeper into this hidden rhythm. You sense that the night is not yet done, that stories still linger unspoken, waiting to rise from the quiet. But for now, the tavern holds its breath, balanced between noise and silence, light and shadow, safety and danger. The hour is late, the fire low, the voices soft. And in this stillness, in this fragile calm, you find yourself both inside the tavern and drifting beyond it, carried gently toward the depths of night. When the tavern door finally creaks open and a gust of damp night air spills inside, it is as though the room exhales. For hours, all within had been sealed away, sheltered from the storm and the vastness of the night beyond the walls. Now, with the door ajar, the world outside seems to reach inward, cold, wet, and untamed. The firelight flickers toward the opening, straining against the darkness, but the storm swallows it whole. Beyond the threshold, there is only the sound of rain striking earth, the deep groan of trees in the wind, and the faint glimmer of muddy tracks leading back toward the village. Stepping outside, you feel the night in full. The air is sharp, colder than it seemed from within the warmth of the tavern. Moisture clings to your skin, carried by mist and drizzle, the last remnants of the evening's downpour. The village is quiet now, nearly lifeless. What had been faintly visible when you first entered, smoke rising from chimneys, the shuffle of townsfolk hurrying home, has long since faded. Windows are shuttered, doors barred, and only the softest orange glow seeps through cracks in the wood. The storm has driven the people inward, just as the tavern drew its company together. The village itself is small, more a cluster of dwellings than a town. Narrow lanes wind between cottages with thatched roofs, their walls darkened by years of smoke and weather. The earth beneath your boots is thick with mud, churned by cartwheels and hooves, now slick with rainwater. Puddles catch what little light the moon allows through the clouded sky, reflecting broken fragments of silver. In the stillness, the smallest sounds become magnified. The creak of a sign swaying in the wind, the trickle of water spilling from a gutter, the distant bark of a restless dog. It is in this still and heavy night that the shape of medieval life becomes clearer. For peasants and villagers, the day has always been governed by the rising and setting of the sun. By this hour, the world belongs not to men and women, but to shadows and silence. To remain outside now is to invite unease, for the night carries with it both superstition and reality. Wolves are said to prowl in forests nearby. Spirits and wandering souls are whispered to walk when the bells no longer toll. Whether one believes such tales or not, the night is a realm of uncertainty, and so most prefer the safety of walls and hearths. Yet the village is not entirely asleep. From one cottage, a faint cry drifts, a newborn's wail piercing briefly through the storm before softening under a mother's hush. From another, the steady clang of a blacksmith's hammer lingers, faint but unmistakable. Some men work late into the hours, bound by duty or by desperation. Somewhere farther down, a cow lows restlessly, unsettled by the weather. Life, even at its quietest, never fully rests. It carries on in muted fragments, scattered across the village like faint embers that refuse to die. The air smells of wet earth, wood smoke, and livestock. It is a raw scent, unpolished, but deeply alive. Each cottage chimney gives off its own particular smoke, some heavy with damp straw, others carrying the sharper tang of seasoned oak or pine. These mingling scents tell you of lives lived close to the elements, where survival depends not on comfort, but on endurance. For the villagers, every day is shaped by the land, the soil that feeds them, the animals that warm them, the weather that dictates their labors. The tavern, warm and noisy as it may seem, is but one small sanctuary within this larger cycle of hardship. As you walk farther, you reach the edge of the village, where the last cottages stand before the road bends into fields. Here, the land opens into wide stretches of farmland and meadow, though at night it appears only as darkness broken by the swaying silhouettes of trees. The rain has softened to a drizzle, but the wind carries with it the restless voices of the land. Branches bending, grass whispering, the faint roll of thunder receding into the distance. This is the rhythm that frames every villager's life, the sound of nature's persistence, both harsh and eternal. It is worth pausing here to reflect on how fragile medieval life truly was. The cottages behind you may seem sturdy, but their walls are thin, their roofs prone to leaking, their stores of food never certain to last the season. Winter looms heavy in the thoughts of every peasant, for it is in winter that hunger bites hardest and sickness spreads quickest. Tonight's storm, though fierce, is a passing trial. But the season itself, long, cold, unyielding, presses harder than any single night could. This is why the tavern exists not merely as a place of drink, but as a place of gathering. It is why fires are lit, why songs are sung, why company is sought. Together, burdens grow lighter, if only for a few hours. You imagine the villagers as they sleep now, in narrow beds, often shared by entire families, wrapped in wool and rough linens. Children curled close to mothers, fathers turned inward after a day of labor. Dreams shaped by hunger or by hope, or by nothing at all beyond the need to rest before dawn calls them again to toil. Their homes are not silent, for sleep in such close quarters is always filled with the sounds of breathing, shifting, coughing. Yet even in this, there is a kind of comfort. To live so near to one another, to share every sound and breath, is to never feel entirely alone. The moon finally breaks through a gap in the clouds, spilling silver light across the rooftops and muddy lanes. For a moment, the village seems transformed. The puddles shine like mirrors, the thatch glimmers with dew, the crooked wooden beams stand etched in pale brilliance. It is a fleeting beauty, quiet and fragile, and yet it lingers, reminding you that even in hardship, moments of grace slip through. The night is not eternal. Even now, faint hints of dawn lie far away on the horizon, waiting their turn. The villagers will rise soon enough, return to their fields, and the cycle will begin again. But here, in this stillness between tavern warmth and morning toil, you walk the middle ground, a space where time itself feels slower, stretched thin by silence and shadow. And as you pause at the village edge, looking out toward the endless road and the dark stretch of countryside beyond, you realize that this moment belongs not only to the people within their cottages, nor to those still gathered at the tavern hearth. It belongs to the land itself, the fields that feed, the storms that test, the nights that weigh heavy. These shape life as much as any hand or voice. The medieval village does not merely exist within its world. It is bound to it, inseparable, fragile yet enduring, forever caught between survival and stillness. When the tavern door finally groaned open on its iron hinges, the sound cut across the murmurs and laughter like a reminder that the world outside still existed. For hours, the heavy oak door had been shut, keeping out the storm, the cold, and the unknown. Inside, the fire had burned steady, the voices had carried on, and time itself had seemed to loosen its grip. But now, as the door opened and then closed again, a chill seeped briefly into the room, and with it, the quiet call of the night. You step outside, leaving the warmth of the tavern behind. Instantly, the air changes. Gone is the haze of smoke and ale, replaced with the raw breath of the storm. The night presses close, damp and heavy, with mist clinging to the ground like a thin veil. Rain still drips steadily from the thatched rooftops, collecting into rivulets that snake through the muddy lanes. The moon hides behind a veil of clouds, offering only the faintest of light, and so your eyes adjust slowly, tracing the outlines of cottages hunched together against the weather. The village is hushed now. What little life it had shown at dusk, carts rumbling, voices calling, animals being driven to shelter, has long since slipped into silence. Windows are shuttered tight, doors barred, and only the faint glow of firelight seeps through cracks in the wood. Here and there, smoke curls lazily from crooked chimneys, carrying the familiar earthy scent of burning oak and damp straw. It mingles with the smell of rain-soaked soil, creating an atmosphere that feels both raw and ancient, untouched by the rush of time. Your boots sink slightly into the mud with each step, pulling at the earth that has been churned by wheels and hooves. Puddles glimmer in the faint moonlight, their surfaces rippling with every drop of rain. Wooden signs creak on rusted hinges as the wind nudges them back and forth, the names of trades barely legible in the dark. The blacksmith's forge, the cooper's shed, the miller's store. All are quiet now, their tools resting, their owners asleep or dozing, waiting for dawn to wake them again. For the villagers, the night is not simply a pause between days. It is a time of unease, of vulnerability. In this age, darkness is thick and consuming. There are no lamps lining the roads, no lanterns burning in neat rows, no hum of distant lights, only the faint glow of hearths and the scattered candles that burn low within homes. Beyond those small points of light, shadows stretch endlessly, carrying with them the fears of the time. Wolves, it is said, prowl in the forests beyond the fields. Spirits wander where roads cross. Witches mutter in the night air, and demons tempt the restless. Whether one believes such tales or not, the silence of the village at night makes them difficult to dismiss. Yet, in the stillness, life persists. From one cottage, faint cries rise, the soft wail of an infant that pierces the quiet before fading into the soothing hush of a mother. From another, the muffled cough of an old man echoes, steady but weak. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks twice, short and sharp, then falls silent again. These scattered sounds remind you that though the village rests, it does not truly sleep. Beneath the roofs of thatch and timber, lives continue in their small, fragile rhythms. The path leads you to the village square, little more than an open space where the ground is most worn. In its center stands a wooden post, weathered and leaning slightly, a relic of countless announcements, punishments, and gatherings. At day, this place is the heart of the community. Children play here, merchants set up stalls, farmers trade their goods. But at night, the square is abandoned, left to the wind and rain. Even the well, its stone rim slick with water, seems watchful in the dark, guarding the silence with an air of patience. Standing here, you cannot help but feel how thin the line is between comfort and hardship in this world. By day, the villagers labor in their fields, tend to their flocks, mend their tools. By night, they withdraw into their cottages, clinging to one another and to the fires that keep the dark at bay. Survival depends not on strength alone, but on community. On neighbors willing to share food, to lend hands, to guard against the unknown. The tavern you left behind is more than a place of drink. It is a lifeline of fellowship, a reminder that no one endures this life entirely alone. The air shifts as the clouds part briefly, and the moon breaks through, spilling silver light across the square. The puddles glisten like shards of glass, the rooftops shimmer faintly, and the outlines of the cottages sharpen against the sky. It is a fleeting beauty, fragile and fleeting, but in its glow, the village seems transformed. For a moment, it feels less like a place of hardship and more like a world suspended in quiet grace, caught between storm and dawn. You walk onward, past the last of the cottages where the village thins and the open fields begin. Here, the air grows colder still, carrying with it the restless sigh of the land. The storm lingers in the distance, its thunder rolling low and long across the horizon. The fields, though hidden in the dark, whisper with the sound of grass bending in the wind. Beyond them, the woods wait, vast and silent, their trees swaying like dark sentinels at the edge of sight. This is where the fears of the villagers take root. By day, the fields feed them, the woods provide timber and game, and the streams give water. But by night, these same places become strange, unknowable. The edges of the familiar dissolve into shadow, and the mind fills the emptiness with old tales. Tales of spirits that follow travelers, of beasts that hunt the unwary, of voices that whisper from the trees. Such stories are not told to entertain, but to remind children not to wander, to remind neighbors to look after one another, to remind all that life here is fragile, easily undone by nature and by chance. And yet, even in this unease, there is a strange calm. The silence of the night, broken only by the distant storm, carries a rhythm of its own. The villagers, curled close to their hearths, surrender to it in sleep, trusting in their walls, their neighbors, and their faith. The land may be harsh, but it also offers moments of stillness like this, moments where time feels stretched thin, where the world seems to pause, holding its breath before the dawn. You linger at the village edge, the tavern's glow far behind you now. Ahead lies the road, muddy and winding, stretching toward unseen places. Behind lies the cluster of cottages, their fires burning low, their people bound together in quiet endurance. Here, between the two, you feel the weight of the night most keenly. It is vast and heavy, but not empty. It is alive with breath and story, with hardship and hope, with the unyielding truth that life, in all its fragility, carries on. And so the night deepens, calm and patient. The villagers sleep, the fields whisper, the woods watch, and in the midst of it all, you walk gently, listening, breathing, resting within the stillness of a world long past, yet forever alive in memory. The road beyond the village stretches forward like a ribbon of earth, its edges blurred by rain and shadow. You pause at its beginning, standing where human hands have built their fragile order, and where untamed land begins. And so the night deepens, calm and patient. The villagers sleep, the fields whisper, the woods watch, and in the midst of it all, You walk gently, listening, breathing, resting within the stillness of a world long past, yet forever alive in memory. The road beyond the village stretches forward like a ribbon of earth, its edges blurred by rain and shadow. Studio, you pause at its beginning, standing where human hands have built their fragile order and where untamed land begins. Behind you, the cottages cluster together for warmth and safety, but ahead lies the open expanse of fields, wide and waiting, breathing under the damp weight of the night. The soil here, though softened by storm, is more than just ground. To the villagers, it is life itself. By day, it is broken by plows, seeded with grain, and tended with aching backs and calloused hands. Each furrow cut into the earth is a promise, fragile and uncertain, but necessary for survival. Tonight, however, the fields are shrouded in silence. The stalks of barley and wheat, bent low by rain, glisten faintly when the moon slips through a break in the clouds. They sway gently in the wind, as if whispering secrets too ancient for human ears. The air is thick with the scent of wet earth, a smell so ordinary yet so deeply tied to the rhythm of life. Every loaf of bread, every spoonful of porridge, every crumb shared at the table begins here, in these fields. But the peasants who labor here see more than crops. They see omens. They see signs in the way the stalks lean, in the patterns of the weather, in the sudden blight that can undo a season's worth of labor. The land gives, but it also takes, and its mystery shapes both faith and fear. As you walk along the field's edge, the sound of water draws your ear. A narrow stream, swollen from the storm, cuts across the landscape, its current alive with rainwater rushing toward unseen rivers. By day, children might wade here, splashing and laughing as they chase minnows in the shallows. Women might gather at its banks to wash clothes, their songs carrying across the valley. But now, in the depth of night, the stream runs fast and restless, its gurgling echoing like a voice. Some might say that voices linger in such waters, that spirits drift in their currents, whispering to those who dare to listen too closely. You follow the water's path for a short while, the mud clinging to your boots, until the fields give way to woodland. The shift is sudden, almost like stepping into another world. The air cools further, the shadows deepen, and the rustling of leaves becomes the dominant sound. Tall oaks and elms rise like pillars, their branches reaching skyward, their trunks slick with rain. Between them, the ground is uneven, scattered with roots and slick moss. The forest seems alive, its presence both grand and unsettling, as though it watches every step you take. For the villagers, these woods are both a blessing and a source of unease. They are rich with timber, with berries and mushrooms, with game that can feed hungry families. Yet they are also dangerous, home to wolves, to outlaws, and in the minds of many, to darker things. Folklore lingers here more heavily than in the open fields. Children are told not to stray too far beneath the canopy, lest they stumble upon the lair of a witch or be led astray by lights that dance deceptively in the dark. You tread carefully, listening to the sounds that rise and fade. The distant hoot of an owl cuts through the silence, steady and solemn. Somewhere far off, a branch cracks, followed by the rustle of unseen movement. It could be a deer, perhaps a fox, or perhaps only the wind bending trees against one another. In this age, when superstition thrives alongside reality, it is never quite possible to know. The night cloaks all in mystery, and the mind fills the gaps with stories passed down through generations. A narrow path winds through the trees, trampled by countless feet before you. In the daylight, peasants might walk this way, carrying bundles of firewood or herding swine into the forest to forage. At night, the same path feels like a passage into the unknown. Your steps echo faintly, softened by wet earth, and every turn of the trail seems to lead deeper into silence. The forest, for all its shadows, has its moments of quiet beauty. Rain clings to the leaves, forming droplets that catch the moonlight when it appears. Ferns unfurl along the ground, their green softened by the dim glow. Mushrooms sprout from fallen logs, clustered like tiny lanterns in the dark. Even here, in a world where hardship reigns, nature weaves its patterns with grace. For those who know how to see, the woods offer not just fear, but wonder. And yet, the weight of belief presses close. The villagers speak of will-o'-the-wisps, ghostly lights said to lead travelers astray into bogs or swamps. Others tell of hunters who vanish, never to be seen again, leaving only their broken arrows and scattered tracks. The line between tale and truth is thin, and perhaps that is why these stories endure. They are not told for entertainment alone. They are warnings, shaped by generations who knew too well how swiftly the forest could swallow the unwary. As you walk, you imagine a peasant family at the forest's edge. By day, they gather kindling, their children helping to drag branches back toward their home. By night, they sit by the fire, whispering prayers for safety while the wind rattles the shutters. Their world is one of balance, between light and dark, between feast and famine, between trust in faith and fear of what lies beyond. The forest embodies that balance perfectly, provider of wood and food, yet keeper of shadows and secrets. A sudden gust of wind shakes the branches above you, scattering droplets of water onto your shoulders. The forest sighs in response, as though releasing a breath it had been holding. For a moment, you pause, simply listening. The storm has moved further away now, its thunder only a faint growl on the horizon. In its wake, the world feels hushed, as though it has settled into a deep, waiting calm. Here, beneath the canopy, you sense the passing of time differently. The villagers count their lives by seasons, by harvests, by the rhythm of planting and reaping. The forest, however, measures time in centuries, in the slow growth of trees, in the patient spread of roots. To step beneath its branches is to be reminded that human lives, with all their struggles and stories, are but a fleeting part of a greater rhythm. The path curves, leading you toward a small clearing where the trees thin. The grass here is long and wet, bowing under the weight of rain. In the center stands a stone, tall and weathered, half buried in moss. It seems out of place, too deliberate to be natural, too worn to be new. Perhaps it was once a marker of land, or perhaps it is older still, a remnant of times when people worshipped the spirits of earth and sky. The villagers avoid such places at night, wary of what lingers there. But to you, it feels calm, steady, eternal. You stand in the clearing for a while, letting the quiet of the forest seep into you. The wind softens, the branches grow still, and only the faint gurgle of the distant stream remains. It is here, in the heart of the woods, that the fragility of medieval life becomes clear. To live in such a world is to exist between forces both nurturing and threatening, both kind and cruel. And yet, within that balance lies a deep resilience, a way of being that endures storms, fears, and long nights such as this one. And so, you walk on, deeper into the forest, carrying with you the hush of the clearing, the weight of the villagers' beliefs, and the timeless rhythm of a world both perilous and profoundly beautiful. As the day drifts into evening once more, the village seems to exhale. The fields are left behind, the tools are set aside, and the smoke of countless hearths rises gently into the dimming sky. Yet, in truth, life here is never fully at rest. Even when the work of daylight ends, other labors begin. The women sit by their fires, sewing, patching, or spinning thread. Children, though tired, still chase one another in the dirt until their mothers call them inside. Men, worn from plowing or tending animals, sit on benches, pulling boots from sore feet, sometimes with groans that betray the aches carried in their bones. This cycle, labor upon labor, task upon task, is not simply the rhythm of one day, but the pattern of years, stretching backward through memory and forward into uncertainty. To live in such a village is to live with little certainty beyond the seasons. The harvest will come, but whether it will be enough, no one can say. Winter will arrive, but how harsh it will be, no one can guess. A child will be born, but whether it will grow strong or falter in sickness remains in the hands of fate. This uncertainty hangs like mist over the village, unseen yet always felt. It is a weight carried not only by the adults, who know the fragility of life, but by the children, who sense it in whispers and warnings, in the prayers murmured over meals, in the solemn faces of parents when misfortune touches a neighbor's home. Yet alongside this fragility lies resilience. The people of the village do not live only in fear. They laugh, they celebrate, they find joy in small things. A loaf of bread baked well, golden at its crust. A child's first step taken on the packed earth of the cottage floor. A piglet born strong, squealing and squirming with life. These moments, though small, are remembered with warmth, spoken of with pride, shared across families as reminders that even in hardship, life continues to give. The village feast days are perhaps the truest reflection of this balance. On such days, the ordinary is cast aside. Work halts, music stirs, and fires are lit brighter than usual. The church bells ring, their tones summoning all to gather, not for labor but for celebration. Bread is shared, often thicker and richer than on common days, and ale flows more freely. The children run wild, their laughter rising into the evening air, while the elders watch with smiles lined by age. But when feast days pass, reality returns. Taxes weigh heavily on every household, demanded by lords who may never set foot within the village yet whose power reaches into every hearth. The coin is scarce, and when coin cannot be found, grain, wool, or livestock are taken instead. These demands gnaw at the people, yet they endure, for refusal is not an option. And still, despite these burdens, a sense of defiance lingers in their endurance. To survive year after year, despite hunger, despite harsh winters, despite lords and wars and sickness, that survival is itself a kind of victory, one unmarked by banners but deeply felt in every home. The seasons carve themselves into the lives of villagers with relentless precision. Spring is labor, planting, and the hope of growth. Summer is toil beneath the sun, sweat dripping into soil. Autumn is harvest, both relief and fear, as families count their stores and pray they will last. Winter is survival, the hardest season, when hunger lurks at the door and illness slips easily into weak bodies. Each season holds its dangers, but together they form a cycle as old as the land itself. To live here is to learn this rhythm not with words, but with one's body, with calloused hands, tired shoulders, and the scars of seasons past. Yet beyond toil and fear, there is also beauty. The villagers know the quiet joy of dawn, when mist rises over the fields and the world feels soft and untouched. They know the comfort of firelight against the winter dark, when family gathers close, their breath visible in the cold air of their cottages. They know the serenity of standing in a meadow at dusk, hearing the distant bells of the church echo across the fields. These are not luxuries. They are the fragments of grace that make the hardships bearable, the reminders that life, even when hard, is still worth living. There is also faith, woven into daily existence. The church stands at the heart of the village, its small tower reaching toward the heavens, its bells marking the hours. Within its walls, prayers are whispered, candles flicker, and hymns rise in voices that, though often tired, are filled with devotion. Faith here is not merely ritual, it is survival. When crops fail, when sickness spreads, when storms destroy, the villagers turn to prayer. They do not always expect miracles, but they seek strength, comfort, and the assurance that their struggles are not unseen for them. God is both distant and near, unreachable in power, but present in every prayer spoken in the shadows of their homes. The village itself, small though it may be, holds layers of memory. The well at its center has seen generations draw water. The stones of the path have been worn smooth by countless feet. The fields that stretch beyond have been plowed by fathers, sons, and grandsons. Each cottage carries its own story. Births, deaths, laughter, loss, all hidden within walls of timber and clay. To an outsider, the village might seem unremarkable, yet to those who live here, it is a world entire, bound by history as much as by earth and sky. And so, as night deepens, as the last embers in the hearths glow low, the village settles into sleep. Dogs curl near doorways, children nestle beneath rough blankets, and parents rest with weary but grateful hearts. Outside, the stars shine cold and sharp, scattered across the vastness of the medieval sky. The silence of night settles, broken only by the occasional cry of an owl or the rustle of wind through the trees. Within each cottage, lives pause, but never fully rest, for the weight of survival lingers even in dreams. The village sleeps, yet its rhythm continues. In the morning, the cycle will begin again. Fields will be tended, animals fed, fires lit. Another day of toil, another day of resilience, another day of quiet, unrecorded history. For in the end, the medieval village is not defined by grand events or battles, but by the endless, humble endurance of its people. And though their names may never be written in books or carved into stone, their lives, their laughter, their hardships, their resilience, are the true heartbeat of the age. High upon a hill, rising above the fields and clustered cottages, stands the stone fortress of the Lord. Its walls, thick and unyielding, cast long shadows across the land below, a constant reminder of power and authority. To the peasants who labor in the fields, the castle is both protector and oppressor, a place of safety in times of danger, yet also the seat of demands, taxes, and unbending rule. Where the village feels fragile and exposed, the castle feels eternal, its very stones declaring permanence. But within its walls, life is far from idle. Entering the castle, one immediately feels the shift in atmosphere. The air is cooler, heavy with the smell of stone, smoke, and the faint traces of straw scattered across the floors. Torches mounted along the walls cast flickering light, illuminating corridors that echo with footsteps and distant voices. Servants hurry about their duties, some carrying water in wooden buckets, others bearing platters of food, still others sweeping the halls or tending fires, Life here is orchestrated by hierarchy, every person bound by duty to someone above. At the center of the castle's life is the Great Hall, an immense chamber with high ceilings supported by beams of dark wood. This is no ordinary room. It is both dining space, courtroom, and gathering place. By day, it is filled with movement, petitioners seeking judgment, soldiers awaiting orders, and musicians ready to play at their lord's command. By night, it becomes a place of feasting, its long tables lined with trenchers of bread, roasted meats, and cups of ale. The great hearth blazes at one end, not only for warmth, but as a symbol of the Lord's wealth. The larger the fire, the greater the impression. The Lord himself sits at the high table, raised above the rest, so that all must look upward toward him. His clothing distinguishes him instantly. Fine fabrics dyed in deep colors, trimmed with fur, adorned with embroidery. Around him sit his family, his most trusted knights, and important guests. Every detail of this arrangement is deliberate, designed to reflect status and command respect. For in the medieval castle, appearances are as powerful as swords, and every gesture carries meaning. Beyond the Lord's family lies the network of retainers, knights, and squires who serve him. The knights, clad in armor when needed and in fine tunics at other times, are both warriors and symbols of the Lord's might. Their training is relentless, their loyalty expected without question. Young squires attend them constantly, carrying weapons, cleaning armor, and absorbing the skills of combat and courtly behavior. Each squire dreams of the day when he too will be dubbed a knight, sworn into a life of service and honor. Yet behind the glamour of shining armor lies the harsh reality of bruised bodies, strict discipline, and the ever-present possibility of death in battle. The castle is also a place of domestic order, kept alive by the unseen labor of countless servants. The kitchens bustle with activity from dawn until nightfall, where cooks oversee fires that burn hot beneath spits of roasting meat. Bread is baked daily in great ovens, while stews bubble in cauldrons large enough to feed dozens. The work is relentless, for the Lord's household is vast, and to fail in one's duty is to risk punishment. Chambermaids keep the Lord's rooms in order, laundresses scrub linen at the well, and stable boys tend to horses with hands raw from rope and leather. Life in the castle may appear grand, but it rests upon the tireless effort of those whose names are never recorded. Yet within these stone walls, life is not solely about labor or survival, it is also about display. When guests arrive, the castle transforms into a stage. Tapestries, woven with scenes of hunts or biblical stories, are hung to cover bare stone and to speak of wealth. Silver goblets gleam in candlelight. Minstrels strike chords on their lutes, and jugglers or fools provide amusement. Such moments are carefully crafted, for hospitality is not simply kindness, but strategy. A lord who entertains lavishly earns respect, for generosity and display are extensions of power. Still, the castle is not immune to danger. Though its walls stand thick and strong, they are built for defense, not comfort. The narrow windows let in little light, their design intended to repel arrows rather than welcome sunshine. Drafts slip easily through the halls, chilling even those wrapped in furs. In winter, despite blazing fires, the cold lingers in every corner, and even the Lord himself cannot escape it fully. In times of siege, the castle transforms into a place of tension. Supplies rationed, gates barred, soldiers at the ready. The very walls that promise safety can also become a prison, sealing all within until the danger passes or hunger forces surrender. Children of the nobility grow up within these walls. their lives a mixture of privilege and strict expectation. Boys are trained early in the arts of war, riding, swordplay, hunting, and the etiquette of command. Girls, meanwhile, are taught the skills of running a household, weaving, and learning the intricate courtesies of noble society. Marriages are rarely about love, but about alliances, each child a piece in a larger game of power and inheritance. Yet despite this, moments of play and innocence still exist. Children chase one another through courtyards, practice their riding on ponies, and find wonder in the stories told by servants or visiting troubadours. Religion, too, holds a firm place within castle life. The private chapel is a sanctuary of carved wood and flickering candlelight, where the family attends Mass and priests offer prayers for their souls. Faith here is not only personal, but political, for piety enhances a lord's standing just as surely as wealth or valor. Gifts to monasteries, pilgrimages, and acts of charity all reinforce the idea that power is not merely temporal, but blessed by heaven itself. And yet, beneath all the grandeur, there is always a thread of fragility. A sickness can sweep through the castle as easily as through a village, sparing neither noble nor servant. A fire in the kitchens, a betrayal among knights, or a poorly timed harvest can shake even the strongest household. For all their power, lords and ladies remain bound to the same uncertainties of fate that weigh upon their peasants, though cloaked in finer fabrics and surrounded by stone. As night settles on the castle, the torches are extinguished one by one, until only the faint glow of the great hearth remains. The lord retires to his chamber, guarded and secure, while servants curl up in straw beds, grateful for rest before the next day's duties. Outside the walls, the village lies in darkness, fields quiet beneath the stars. From the hill, the castle looks unshakable, a fortress against the world. Yet within its walls, life is as restless, as fragile, and as deeply human as anywhere else in the medieval world. Dawn in the castle begins not with silence, but with the stirrings of labor. Before the lord and lady stir from their chambers, servants are already awake, moving briskly through the cold stone corridors. Fires must be stoked, bread must be baked, and the day's water carried in from wells or streams. The castle may look like an immovable monument of stone, but inside it hums with constant, unseen energy. Energy supplied by countless hands, working before the rest of the household even opens its eyes. For the noble family, mornings are slower and more deliberate. The lord may be roused by attendants helping him dress, for his clothing is not simple but layered. Linen undershirts, wool tunics, and overgarments of silk or fur if wealth allows. Each piece is carefully fastened, not only for comfort, but to reflect his rank. A lady of the castle, meanwhile, is dressed by her maidens, her hair combed, sometimes braided, and perhaps covered by a veil or wimple. Such preparations are more than personal grooming. They are part of the ritual of status, for in the medieval world, appearance reflects authority. Once dressed, the day divides along lines of responsibility. For the lord, mornings might begin with a session in the great hall, where he hears disputes among villagers or retainers. These disputes range from arguments over land to accusations of theft. To rule a castle is not only to command knights, but to act as judge, protector, and, at times, executioner. Each judgment reinforces the order of his domain. For the lady, the morning may involve overseeing the domestic sphere. Contrary to the assumption that noble women lived only in luxury, their days could be filled with work, supervising servants, managing the household accounts, and ensuring supplies were properly stored. In the absence of her husband, she might even act as steward of the estate, wielding considerable authority. Her role is vital, for the smooth functioning of the castle rests heavily upon her ability to coordinate countless tasks. Beyond the noble chambers, the training yard comes alive with sound. Clashing wooden swords ring against shields, the shouts of squires mixing with the grunts of knights in practice. Here, boys in their early teens train relentlessly, preparing for the life expected of them. A squire may begin his day polishing armor until it gleams, saddling his master's horse, and then taking up his own practice weapon. He learns to ride, to fight, and, equally important, to serve with humility. The training is grueling, filled with bruises, blisters, and the constant correction of stern instructors. Yet each lesson pushes him closer to the coveted moment when he will be dubbed a knight. Knights themselves, though often romanticized, endure a life of discipline. They must remain skilled not only in the sword, but in the lance, the bow, and the hunt. Their duties are both martial and ceremonial, for a knight must fight with strength, but also uphold the chivalric code, honor, loyalty, and service to their lord. When not at war, they train, patrol, or accompany their lord on hunts. The hunt, though cloaked in pleasure, is a serious matter, for it trains both horse and rider, providing practice in tactics that might one day decide a battle. As the morning fades, the castle kitchens grow louder. Huge fires roar beneath cauldrons of boiling broth. Bread is pulled from ovens, and spits are turned slowly over flames, roasting meat until its scent fills the halls. Feeding a household of this size is no small task, for dozens, sometimes hundreds, of mouths must be fed. Meals are not served individually, but placed in large trenchers, shared between pairs or groups. Nobles dine on finer cuts of meat, spiced with herbs, while servants make do with coarser fare, thick pottage, black bread, and, if lucky, scraps left from the high table. When the midday meal is announced, the great hall fills with sound. Trumpets or horns may signal the Lord's entrance, and everyone must rise as he and his family take their places. The meal begins only after prayers, for to eat is also to honor God's provision. The feast, whether grand or modest, is conducted with ritual. Servants move constantly, pouring ale, replacing trenchers, clearing bones. Minstrels or jesters may perform to add liveliness, though the atmosphere is always shaped by hierarchy. What the Lord eats, where he sits, how his guests are arranged, all reinforce the power he commands. After the meal, the castle resumes its rhythm. The Lord may ride out to inspect his lands or practice falconry, a pastime that combines leisure with prestige. To command a trained bird of prey, whether hawk or falcon, is to display wealth and skill, for falconry is not easily mastered. The lady may spend her time in embroidery, a task often dismissed as pastime, but deeply valued as art. Tapestries and embroidered garments were symbols of wealth, and a lady's work might hang proudly in the hall, admired by all who entered. Elsewhere, scribes or clerks bend over parchment in the castle's quieter chambers. Literacy is rare in the medieval world, but within the castle, written records are essential. They account for harvests, taxes, agreements, and letters sent to distant allies. The ink is dark and smudges easily, quills must be sharpened, and parchment is precious. Each stroke of the pen is deliberate, carrying weight that will outlast the moment. As evening nears, the castle's rhythm shifts again. Torches are lit in the corridors, the great hall prepared for supper, though this meal is lighter than the midday feast. The Lord may invite musicians, or perhaps a storyteller who brings news from afar. Stories of battles, saints, or distant lands stir the imagination, linking the castle to a wider world beyond its walls. When night settles, the household retires. Servants curl into straw-stuffed mattresses in the lower halls, while squires sleep in corners near their masters. The lord and lady withdraw to their chambers, where heavy curtains around their bed keep out drafts. The day ends as it began, with labor, ritual, and the awareness that life inside these walls, though privileged, is never free from duty. The castle is often imagined as a place of constant leisure for its lords and ladies, but in truth, it is more like a machine. Every cog, from servant to knight, must move in order for it to function. Daily life here is a dance between splendor and labor, between privilege and responsibility. Where the village relies on the rhythm of the seasons, the castle relies on the rhythm of order. It is a world of stone and ceremony, of discipline and display, every day structured so that the fragile illusion of permanence can endure. And as the torches fade and the castle sinks into slumber, its great walls once again stand silent against the night, guardians of power and symbols of a medieval world, both ordered and uncertain. Life within castle walls, though bound by order and routine, was never without interruption. The medieval castle was a stage for extremes, splendor and scarcity, joy and fear, ritual and chaos. For within those stone walls, days of monotony could suddenly give way to events that marked a lifetime. On days of celebration, the castle transformed itself into a beacon of festivity. Trumpets blared from towers, banners unfurled along battlements, and courtyards filled with visitors. Weddings, for instance, were not merely unions of hearts, but of power and land. When the lord's daughter was wed to a neighboring nobleman, the castle's halls would burst with guests, knights in polished armor, ladies in gowns embroidered with gold thread, clerics in their solemn robes. The chapel echoed with prayers, vows, and chants, while outside, minstrels tuned their instruments for the feast that would follow. Inside the great hall, tables groaned beneath the weight of food, roasted boar with apples, trenchers of bread, pies stuffed with spiced meats, and pitchers of ale and wine awaited eager hands. For the poor, who sometimes gathered at the edges of the feast, scraps thrown from the tables were treasures, flavors and fullness they might not taste again for months. The Lord's generosity was on display, for to host lavishly was to show power, wealth, and divine favor. And as torches burned late into the night, the air filled with laughter, song, and the pounding of feet as nobles and commoners alike joined in dances that echoed against stone walls. Tournaments, too, brought excitement. The castle courtyard became an arena, and the field beyond the moat filled with tents, pennants, and eager spectators. Knights polished their armor until it reflected the sun, their crests proudly displayed upon their shields. Heralds announced names and titles as combatants prepared for the joust, where two riders thundered toward each other with lances lowered, the ground trembling beneath hooves. Splinters flew as wood shattered against steel, cheers erupted from the crowd, and the victor basked in glory. For knights, tournaments were more than sport. They were a chance to prove valor, win favor, and sometimes even secure fortune. For nobles, they were a display of prestige, a reminder of their dominance in both peace and war. The lady of the castle might present a token, a scarf, a ribbon, a favor, that a knight would proudly wear into combat. And though tournaments were games, they were not without danger. Broken bones, concussions, and even death were not uncommon, for the line between sport and real combat was thin. But just as the castle could ring with music and triumph, it could also sink into silence and dread. A siege transformed its world in an instant. Imagine the watchman's cry from the tower. Enemy banners spotted on the horizon. Bells rang out, villagers rushed inside, and the great gates slammed shut. The castle, once a place of ceremony, became a fortress of survival. Supplies stored in advance now determined endurance. Granaries were sealed, wells guarded, livestock driven inside. Daily routines shifted. Knights prepared weapons. Servants carried boiling water or tar to the battlements. Archers strung their bows. The great hall became a planning chamber. Maps spread across the Lord's table, while outside, the enemy's campfires flickered like stars across the landscape. Days under siege stretched endlessly. Food dwindled, rationing tightened, and hunger crept into every stomach. Disease often followed, spreading faster within the crowded walls. Yet morale was as crucial as provisions. Priests led prayers in the chapel, invoking divine protection, while minstrels sang songs of courage to drown out the fear of arrows striking stone. Each night, the people of the castle listened to the eerie sounds of war, the thud of siege engines, the crash of stones against walls, the cries of men in the dark. Even without war, crisis could arrive silently. The plague, sweeping through Europe in the 14th century, did not spare the security of castle walls. When illness spread, it respected neither rank nor wealth. A nobleman might fall ill as quickly as a servant. Fear of contagion drove families to isolate. Chapels overflowed with prayers for mercy, and the laughter of feasts gave way to the tolling of bells. Death within the walls reminded all that even stone could not shield against fate. And yet, after such shadows, castles found ways to return to light. Victory after a siege brought celebration. Survivors gave thanks in chapels, and feasts once again filled the halls. Weddings and tournaments resumed, tapestries were rehung, and laughter returned to the corridors. This rhythm of contrast, of joy followed by hardship, of feast interrupted by famine, was the heartbeat of castle life. It is easy now to see castles only as ruins, silent and gray against rolling hills. But in their prime, they were alive with shifting moods. One week, the great hall might resound with music, goblets raised high in toasts. The next, it might echo with whispers of fear as families huddled during a siege. One day, the courtyard might be crowded with brightly colored tents for a tournament. The next, it might be filled with smoke from burning arrows. To live in a castle was to live on the edge of extremes. For the lord and lady, it meant balancing grandeur with responsibility. For knights, it meant turning from playful jousts to deadly combat in the blink of an eye. For servants, it meant serving at feasts one month and surviving on crumbs the next. The stone walls that promised protection also bore witness to joy, sorrow, triumph, and despair. By night, when torches burned low and music or silence faded into darkness, the people of the castle must have wondered which tomorrow awaited them. Would the morning bring celebration, or would it bring war? Would the great hall be filled with laughter, or would it echo with prayers for deliverance? The castle was more than stone. It was a mirror of medieval life itself, unpredictable, fragile, yet endlessly resilient. And so within those walls, every moment mattered, whether feast or famine, tournament or siege, joy or sorrow. Life here was a cycle, turning endlessly, as enduring as the stone walls themselves. When the first rays of dawn stretched across the medieval town, Life outside the castle walls stirred with a very different rhythm. While the castle's guards made their rounds and the chapel bells called for prayer, the streets below filled with the sounds of vendors preparing their stalls, carts creaking under the weight of goods, and animals braying as they were herded toward the open square. For many, the marketplace was not simply a place to buy or sell. It was the lifeline of daily existence, the beating heart of the medieval town. The market square was rarely empty. On ordinary days, townsfolk gathered to purchase bread, wool, salted fish, or firewood. But on designated market days, often once or twice a week, the place transformed into a spectacle of humanity. Farmers from surrounding villages arrived at dawn, leading oxen or pushing carts piled high with hay, cabbages, onions, and turnips. Shepherds guided flocks of sheep through narrow streets, their hooves clattering on cobblestones, while butchers led pigs squealing toward their pens. The square itself was a riot of colors and smells. Stalls lined the perimeter, each draped with cloth to shield sellers from sun or rain. Wooden tables groaned with baskets of apples, bundles of herbs, and loaves of coarse brown bread still warm from the oven. Fishmongers laid out rows of eels, trout, and dried herring, their sharp scent mingling with the tang of salt. Nearby, cheese wheels stood stacked in towers, their rinds coated with ash to preserve them. The air was thick with the fragrance of spices brought from faraway lands, cinnamon, pepper, saffron, sold in tiny packets more precious than gold to the common folk who could scarcely afford them. Noise was constant. Vendors shouted their wares, competing for attention. Fresh eggs, still warm this morning. Woolen cloaks to keep you through winter. Salted cod, straight from the coast. Haggling was expected, even required. Buyers knew better than to accept the first price, and sellers prepared for sharp words and keen negotiations. Coins clinked from one hand to another, though barter remained common. A basket of onions might buy a bundle of firewood, or a pair of shoes might be exchanged for a sack of flour. The marketplace was not only about survival, it was about community. Gossip passed through the air as quickly as coins. News of wars, royal decrees, or distant plagues often reached villagers not from official heralds, but from the chatter of merchants and travelers. A man from one village might hear of another's failed harvest. A woman might learn of a lord's new tax, and children might pass along tales of knights seen riding along the roads. The market, in truth, was as much a place of stories as it was of trade. Yet, for all its bustle, the market was also a place of hierarchy and control. Lords and officials kept watch, for the marketplace was a source of tax revenue. Stallholders often had to pay for the right to sell, handing over coins to clerks who tallied every booth. Measures of grain, ale, and cloth were regulated to prevent fraud, and fines were levied for those who cheated their neighbors. At times, officials would even destroy false weights or confiscate spoiled food to protect buyers. Justice, too, was not far from the square. Stocks or whipping posts often stood nearby, where those who stole or defied market rules were punished in full view of the crowd. But alongside the ordinary, the marketplace also offered glimpses of the extraordinary. On fair days, which might happen once or twice a year, the town came alive in ways that ordinary markets could never match. Merchants from distant cities, sometimes from as far as Flanders, Italy, or the Middle East, arrived with caravans of goods. Silks shimmered in the sunlight, jewelry glittered, and rare fruits like oranges or pomegranates drew wide-eyed stares from villagers who had never seen such wonders. Jugglers and minstrels performed to entertain, acrobats flipped in the dust, and wandering preachers drew crowds with fiery sermons. For a peasant who spent most of life tethered to the soil, these fairs were a glimpse into a wider world. Amid the spectacle, pickpockets thrived. Crowds made easy targets for those quick of hand and light of foot. Children were sometimes sent by desperate parents to steal a loaf of bread or a purse of coins, knowing that punishment could be severe if they were caught. The risk of theft was constant, yet so too was the chance for fortune. A farmer might sell a particularly good harvest of grain, a weaver might find a noble eager for fine cloth, or a brewer might secure steady customers for his ale. The marketplace could change lives in a single day. The sensory world of the market was overwhelming. The smell of roasted meat from a cook's stall mingled with the stench of animal dung. The ringing of a blacksmith's hammer echoed from the edge of the square, while a tanner's vats gave off a stifling odor that made passers-by wrinkle their noses. Children darted through the chaos, some helping parents, others chasing each other through the throngs. For them, the market was a place of wonder. Bright fabrics, strange toys, sugared nuts if they were lucky. For the poor, it was also a place of longing. Not everyone could afford the sweetmeats or rare fabrics on display. Many came simply to look, to dream, or to hope for a scrap or two left unsold at the end of the day. Despite the noise and chaos, the market was vital. It sustained towns and villages, linked rural farmers with urban craftsmen, and tied the lives of peasants to the movements of trade that stretched across kingdoms. Without the market, survival was unthinkable. With it, medieval society pulsed with energy, weaving together the lives of rich and poor, stranger and neighbor, priest and merchant. As the sun dipped lower and shadows stretched across the square, stalls began to close. Goods unsold were packed away, animals herded back to pens, and tired vendors counted their coins by the light of lanterns. Yet even as the square emptied, echoes of the day remained. The trampled earth, the lingering scents, the whispered news that would carry into taverns and homes. For in the end, the marketplace was not simply where goods changed hands. It was where the world of the medieval man and woman came alive in all its rawness, its hunger, its hope, its noise, and its necessity. It was, in every sense, the heart of their survival. While the open market square was the realm of farmers, peddlers, and wandering traders, the backbone of every medieval town lay in the craftsmen, the men and women who worked in narrow workshops, hammering, shaping, weaving, baking, and building the tools and goods that made daily life possible. If the market was the heart of a medieval town, the guilds were its bones, providing structure, strength, and form. The cobbled streets that wound through a town often echoed with the clatter of work. From dawn until dusk, sounds of industry filled the air. The clang of a blacksmith's hammer striking hot iron on an anvil, the rhythmic clack of a weaver's loom, the steady thud of a mill wheel turning grain into flour. Work spilled out of shops and onto the street itself. Apprentices swept sawdust into gutters, coopers rolled finished barrels toward the docks, and bakers carried fresh loaves still steaming into their stalls. Every trade had its place, and many streets became defined by the craftsmen who worked there. A town might have a tanner's row, where the air reeked of treated hides, a potter's lane, where clay dust floated in the air, or a smithy street, where sparks flew well into the night. At the heart of this industrious world were the guilds, associations of craftsmen who banded together not just for business, but for survival. A guild was more than a professional union. It set the standards for work, ensuring that a shoe made by a cobbler or a tool forged by a smith met a certain quality. It decided who could join the trade and who could not. It trained apprentices, oversaw journeymen, and recognized masters. And perhaps most importantly, it provided protection, both against competition and against poverty. The journey into a craft began early. Boys as young as 10 or 12 might be sent by their families to serve as apprentices. They lived in their master's household, learning not just the trade, but also discipline, manners, and often literacy if the craft required records or contracts. An apprentice worked for years, often 7 or more, with little pay beyond food, shelter, and instruction. Once his term ended, he became a journeyman, free to work for wages, often traveling from town to town to learn from different masters. Only a select few rose to the rank of master, which required years of experience, proof of skill, and the ability to create a masterpiece worthy of guild approval. To be a master was to gain not just respect, but independence, the right to own a shop, train apprentices, and pass on the craft to one's children. Guilds guarded these privileges fiercely. They set prices to prevent undercutting, inspected goods to maintain quality, and punished those who worked outside the system. A craftsman who dared to sell without guild approval risked fines, confiscation of goods, or even expulsion from the trade altogether. In return, guilds offered a safety net. If a member fell sick, the guild might provide aid. If he died, it might help support his widow and children. Many guilds also took part in religious life, sponsoring altars in churches, commissioning artworks, and marching in processions under their banners. Each craft carried its own identity and reputation. Blacksmiths, often considered the backbone of every town, forged nails, tools, horseshoes, and weapons, their smithies glowing with fire through the night. Masons carved the very stones that built cathedrals and castles, their guilds famed for secrecy and skill. Weavers and fullers worked with wool, one of the most valuable trades in Europe, turning sheep's fleece into cloth that could be dyed, cut, and sold across kingdoms. Bakers worked before dawn, kneading heavy doughs of rye or barley, while brewers, often women, known as alewives, supplied the taverns with the drink that was safer than water. Each craft fed into the next, linking the economy of the town like gears in a great machine. The rhythm of guild life also extended into the streets. Shop fronts often doubled as homes, with families living above their workshops. Wooden shutters would swing open in the morning, displaying goods for sale, shoes hanging on pegs, bolts of cloth unrolled, baskets of bread lined in rows. Customers could watch craftsmen at work as they bargained, blurring the line between production and trade. Apprentices might be scolded loudly in the street, sparks might leap from an open forge, and the smell of tanning hides might waft from vats behind a workshop. The life of a craftsman was public, exposed, and deeply tied to the pulse of the town itself. Beyond economics, guilds carried political weight. In many towns, guild leaders sat on councils, advised rulers, or even controlled civic policy. A powerful guild of weavers or merchants could rival a noble's authority, shaping laws to protect its members' interests. This gave craftsmen a voice that peasants in the countryside rarely had, binding their fortunes to the growth of the town. At times, guilds clashed with lords, bishops, or even kings, their banners flying as they defended their rights. But guild life was not without limits. For the poor or unskilled, entry into a guild was nearly impossible. Women, though often vital in crafts like brewing, weaving, or midwifery, were frequently excluded from official guild membership, their work absorbed under the name of fathers or husbands. For those who could not afford apprenticeships or who lacked the right connections, opportunities were slim. And though guilds claimed to uphold fairness, they also protected monopolies, leaving outsiders and unregistered workers vulnerable. Still, for those within the system, guild membership offered pride and purpose. Festivals often saw guilds marching in procession, carrying their banners and displaying symbols of their craft. Bakers with loaves, butchers with knives, smiths with hammers. Their presence was more than ceremonial. It reminded all who watched that the town rested on the shoulders of its craftsmen. As the sun fell on a workday, the noise of industry slowed. Workshops shuttered, apprentices swept tools into place, and families gathered for simple meals in the rooms above their shops. Yet even in the stillness, the work of the guilds lingered. In the shoes worn by travelers, in the ale poured in taverns, in the nails hammered into beams, and in the stones that built cathedrals towering above the town. The work of the craftsman was everywhere, woven into the very fabric of medieval life. In this way, guilds did more than regulate labor or secure wages. They forged identities, created communities, and bound craftsmen to one another in a shared struggle for survival and respect. Within their halls, beneath their banners, and in the sweat of their workshops, the lifeblood of the medieval town found its form. As we arrive at this final stretch of our journey through the quieter corners of Greek mythology, it is worth taking a moment to step back and consider the shape of the stories we have explored. From forgotten nymphs to half-remembered heroes, from tales that feel more like whispers than proclamations, we have walked through a landscape where the myths seem less like thunderclaps and more like faint echoes carried on the wind. This section serves as a gentle pause, a kind of gathering together of threads before we close our eyes and drift toward the silence of the outro. When we think of mythology, especially Greek mythology, our minds often leap to the great figures, the Olympians who thunder across the heavens, the heroes who stride boldly into battle, the monstrous beings who challenge human courage. Yet behind these dazzling stories there exists a quieter tapestry, tales too modest to be carved into marble, too subdued to command the grand amphitheaters. And yet, it is within these softer legends that we glimpse something deeply human. These were the myths ordinary people carried in their daily lives, stories whispered at hearthsides, murmured by shepherds on lonely hills, or tucked into the memories of sailors who navigated by the stars. We have seen how myths that lack drama or spectacle can still carry weight. A minor river god may never command the thunderbolts of Zeus, yet to the villagers who lived along his waters, he was a presence more intimate and real. His name might fade in our modern retellings, but once upon a time he shaped lives. To understand these boring myths, as some might call them, is to understand how mythology was not simply grand entertainment. It was lived reality. Every whisper of the wind, every curve of the stream, every quiet grove seemed to have its spirit, its tale, its subtle reminder of a world where the divine and the mortal brushed constantly against each other. And perhaps this is why these quieter stories feel strangely soothing. They remind us that myth is not always a drama of conquest or punishment. Sometimes it is the tale of a god who simply watched over a single spring, or a hero whose greatest feat was not victory in war, but the keeping of a promise. These are not stories that seek to overwhelm us. They are, in their own way, restful. They slow the mind. They allow the listener not to strain for meaning, but to simply float, gently, in a current of narrative. In their subdued nature, they also tell us something about memory. Grand myths survive because they dazzle. Quiet myths vanish because they do not. And yet, in those faint outlines of forgotten gods and overlooked figures, there is a kind of poignancy. We are reminded that stories, like people, fade not because they lack value, but because time, with its endless turning, cannot hold everything. What is forgotten does not always deserve forgetting, but it drifts away nonetheless. There is something calming, even humbling, in acknowledging this. Just as each of us will one day be remembered only faintly, these myths too become shadows, yet shadows that still carry a trace of warmth. This is what makes them fitting companions for a story meant for sleep. They do not rush. They do not demand. Instead, they invite you to rest in their quiet rhythms, to let go of urgency, to allow yourself to drift along with them. In this way, the myths themselves almost transform into lullabies. Their lack of intensity is not a flaw. It is their gift. As we wrap up this exploration, we can think of the forgotten myths as a kind of twilight between wakefulness and dreams. The bold stories of gods and heroes are like the blazing sun at noon, demanding our full attention. But these gentler tales are like dusk. They soften the edges, blur the boundaries, and make space for rest. When the stars finally appear, these stories do not vanish. They merely settle into the background, like constellations we no longer name, but which still guide us quietly across the night. And so, standing here at the close of this section, we can see how even myths deemed boring carry their own resonance. They are not meant to dazzle, but to endure in subtler ways. They whisper rather than roar. They linger rather than conquer. And perhaps in listening to them, really listening, we come closer to the heart of what mythology has always been. Not only the record of thunderous gods, but the echo of countless human voices, passing down meaning through story. Let this thought rest with you now. The myths we leave behind tonight are like footprints fading in the sand. They do not clamor to be remembered, and yet, for this moment, we have remembered them. We have walked alongside them, given them space, and in doing so allowed them a brief flicker of life again. As we turn from them now, there is no sense of loss, only a sense of gentle closure. Their voices grow quieter, but not in sorrow, in peace. It is here that our journey through this section finds its natural close. We have traveled through the faint corridors of memory, touched the soft edges of stories that the world nearly forgot, and seen how even in their quietness, they shine with meaning. Now, before the outro, we allow ourselves to pause, to rest, to let the echoes settle into silence. For in silence, too, there is a story. The story of stillness, of endings, of the calm that comes before sleep fully embraces us. Now, as we step gently away from the world of myths, there is a sense of release, as though the stories we have visited are slowly dissolving into the night around us. You no longer need to hold on to their details. You do not need to remember the names of forgotten nymphs or recall the rivers that once carried gods upon their currents. They are fading now, softly, just as dreams fade when the morning sun rises. And yet, their fading is not a loss. It is an easing. Their quiet departure mirrors the way your own thoughts can now drift, loosen, and fall away, one by one, into rest. It is a gentle truth that all stories, no matter how powerful, eventually quiet themselves. Even the mightiest myths, even the boldest gods, eventually give way to silence. Tonight, we have walked through the quieter myths, the ones already half asleep in the world's memory, and now they guide us naturally into our own state of stillness. Just as they slipped beneath the surface of history, you too may slip beneath the surface of wakefulness. You might imagine yourself lying on a shoreline at dusk. The tide comes in softly, brushing against the sand in slow, steady waves. Each wave is like a thought that touches your mind, then pulls back, leaving nothing but smoothness behind. Some waves are larger, others smaller, but they all recede again and again until the shore of your mind is calm and quiet. You no longer need to chase the waves or hold them. You simply let them come and go, knowing that each one carries you closer to rest. This is the gift of the myths we've shared. They ask for nothing of you. They do not challenge you or call for great effort. They simply offer their presence, then release you into silence. And in their stillness, they remind you that life too has its rhythms. There are times of activity when the stories are grand and the moments are full of energy. And then there are times of quiet, when things slow, when the world feels hushed, and when the only task left is to surrender. Tonight is one of those moments. You might picture yourself walking through a grove of olive trees, the kind of grove that might have been sacred to some forgotten god in ancient Greece. The trees stand in calm rows, their silvery leaves stirring lightly in the evening breeze. The air is cool, carrying the faint scent of earth and wood. The path beneath your feet is soft with fallen leaves, and as you walk, you hear nothing but the steady rhythm of your steps and the gentle whisper of the wind. It is a place of peace, timeless and untroubled. No matter what myths have faded or what histories have been forgotten, this grove endures, an eternal space of stillness. And here, in this grove, you may rest. Breath becomes important now. Slowly in, slowly out, like the rise and fall of the sea, like the rhythm of leaves swaying in the wind. Each breath draws you deeper into calm. Each breath reminds you that you are safe, you are grounded, you are at ease. You do not need to search for meaning in the myths anymore. You do not need to follow their paths or chase their characters. You can let them pass, like clouds drifting across the night sky. The stars begin to appear, one by one, as night deepens. In ancient times, sailors looked to those stars, weaving them into stories of gods and heroes. But you do not need to name them now. You do not need to chart their constellations. You simply allow them to glimmer softly above you, their light steady and calm. They are not guiding you to adventure or to conquest, but simply to rest. Their glow is not a call to journey. It is an invitation to close your eyes and drift deeper into peace. The world itself feels slower now. Time loosens. The ticking of the clock fades into the background. Even your body begins to sink into the surface beneath you, heavier, more at ease, as though the ground itself is holding you, supporting you, keeping you safe. This weight is not a burden. It is comfort. It is your body's way of saying that it is ready to let go. The muscles soften, the breath steadies, the mind clears. And so, as this first part of the outro unfolds, you may find yourself already slipping into that space between waking and sleep. That space where images blur, where thoughts become softer, less defined, where time stretches and bends. You may hear the faint echo of a story still lingering, but it no longer asks you to follow. It is like a lantern glowing faintly on a distant path, its light small, its presence gentle, until it too fades into the darkness. There is nothing you must do now, no journey to complete, no character to remember, no tale to carry. All of it can dissolve. What remains is simply you, your breath, your stillness, your quiet. You are no longer a listener of myths, no longer a traveler through ancient lands. You are simply here, in this moment, resting, easing into sleep. And in this gentle letting go, you are already where you need to be. The myths have done their work, guiding you softly to this threshold. Now you may step across, into a deeper quiet, and as you do, know that nothing is lost. The stories may fade, but the calm they leave behind stays with you, like a soft echo, carrying you forward into peaceful rest. Now, there is nothing left to hold on to. The myths have dissolved, the stories have grown quiet, and all that remains is stillness. You are safe, you are calm, and you are free to let go completely. Breathe slowly, softly. With every inhale, you draw in peace. With every exhale, you release the last traces of thought. The body is heavy, warm, at rest. The mind is quiet, untroubled, drifting. Imagine the night sky above you, vast and endless. The stars shimmer faintly, distant and eternal. Their light is steady but soft, guiding you not to adventure, but into deep, nourishing sleep. You do not need to reach for them. You do not need to move at all. Simply let them glow above you while you drift below, carried gently into dreams. The world grows softer now. Time slows. Thoughts fade. You are sinking into the deepest layers of calm. You are safe. You are held. You are at peace. And now, it is time to rest. Sleep well. Now, there is nothing left to hold on to. The myths have dissolved, the stories have grown quiet, and all that remains is stillness. You are safe, you are calm, and you are free to let go completely. Breathe slowly, softly. With every inhale, you draw in peace. With every exhale, you release the last traces of thought. The body is heavy, warm, at rest. The mind is quiet, untroubled, drifting. Imagine the night sky above you, vast and endless. The stars shimmer faintly, distant and eternal. Their light is steady, but soft, guiding you not to adventure, but into deep, nourishing sleep. You do not need to reach for them. You do not need to move at all. Simply let them glow above you while you drift below, carried gently into dreams. The world grows softer now. Time slows. Thoughts fade. You are sinking into the deepest layers of calm. You are safe. You are held. You are at peace. And now, it is time to rest. Sleep well.